I'm Melissa.
And I'm Lee, and we are busy mums, company founders, and all-round early learning nerds. Welcome to our podcast, Growing Little Humans.
Kids aren't born with a user manual, so each week we'll try and cover many topics that you guys encounter and worry about each and every day while you're raising your little humans.
Hey Mel.
Hi Lee.
Today it's a little bit different because it's just you and I talking to each other today.
It is.
And today we're going to be talking about first day at nursery, first day at daycare. So in Australia and the US, I believe, we refer to it as daycare, but in the UK and in the Middle East, we call it nursery. So yeah, we're here to talk about first day at nursery, and it is a really monumental time for most parents because it's often the first time they've left their precious little one, with other people for a prolonged period of time. And it's a milestone as well, I guess, because it's the start of their formal schooling, essentially.
It is. And I think that's a really big thing for parents that, before that they've been in the family home, maybe they've had their play dates, but this is them, the journey of their first formal education experience. So, and from here, then they go on to big school and then bigger school and bigger school again. So it is a really big time. And I think like any developmental milestone in parents' minds, they want it to do well and they want it to run smoothly and they want that easy transition. And I think like anything, it's the time you put in beforehand that really makes that experience a lot smoother.
Can make it smoother.
Yeah, can make it a lot smoother.
I absolutely remember taking Bailey to nursery for the very first time, and I just sat in the car afterwards and howled my eyes out.
Yeah, it's really tough on parents, and it is, because it's them, like you said, them leaving the most precious thing they have in the world.
Exactly.
In the care of other people.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, the preparation for that is really, really vital, that beforehand your little one has been left with either a nanny or, for a friend for a play date. And
there's been some separation.
Separation. And I think that sort of always shows that mummy and daddy will leave you and then mummy and daddy always come back and pick you up, and I think that's really important.
So let's start at the beginning. Why are we sending our children to nursery at all, and how will this help their social and emotional development?
So I think it's really changed over, the last, 5 to 10 years, especially in the focus on early childhood education. And when I say that, I say education, because before that it's always been babysitting, especially in the 0 to 3 space, babysitting or child minding. And as we know, current research is showing that, children's experiences this early age is really setting the foundation for their whole schooling experience. So they are ready and open to learn. So we need to start, preparing them for that learning experience.
And we did that amazing neuroscience episode with Dr. Habak about how children's minds from 0 to 5 years are just growing at such a exponential rate that this is the time that they are ripest for learning, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about, they're being sponges, and what does that actually mean? So, Dr. Back actually really unpacked what that does mean for them to be a sponge. So it's about, setting them, like I said, setting them up for those experiences. They're ready, they're open to learn, especially with their languages. We know now that, children can learn, so many different languages, and they're so easier at that stage than it is after they've turned, 8 and beyond. So it's, really setting them up for that. So it's, they're ready to socialise. I think they say socialisation is really, really important at this age. And a lot of those skills that they're going to need down the track. So they start to make friends, which is your collaboration and your communication skills, and then they're starting to learn that they grow their resilience because they're being able to separate from their parents. That's a really, really big, important skill that they're going to need when they, as they move through their schooling and beyond. I think it's a really important thing for parents to look at now, that they being at home and maybe playing by themselves or watching the television is not where it's the best fit for your child. It's not going to prepare them. Yeah, absolutely.
And so how can parents make this a smooth transition? Like how can parents emotionally and practically prepare their children for this first day at nursery especially and the whole experience? Like what can they do in the lead up to that first day to try and make this an easier time?
Yeah, I think really, really important to go and have a tour of the nursery or the centre, so that they can ask. That will really generate a lot of questions, and the family can sit and discuss those questions, and then they can reference that when they're talking to their children. You're really going to love the slide there. Do you remember that slide we saw at the centre?
Yes, exactly.
And
they've seen it.
Absolutely. It starts to build that visual of what that's going to look like in their little minds.
It's not an unknown place.
It's not a known place, and you can drive past it, definitely have a tour and have a look. I know during the COVID, a lot of parents were having a look online. A lot of schools have walkthroughs and things now. And you can revisit that as much as you want in the lead up to that. Some children, everyone's different, all children are different, and they might have lots of questions and some might not have lots of questions. If they do, then it's a really good thing for you to be able to share that with them. And then, of course, it's how you're talking about it. Lots of excitement. If you're on the phone, they're going to have their first day at nursery, their first day at school. They're going to have such a great time. They're going to meet these great friends.
Play lots of games
lots of games, and we saw the play equipment. So I think they're looking to you as a parent for how you're feeling about the experience. And I think that's really, really important, that all they get from you is just really, really positive vibes, absolutely. Then you can go and involve them more in the process, take them to choose what maybe a first day outfit. You can read books about first days at nurseries with your children. You can go
choosing their backpack,
choosing maybe a pair of shoes that they can use independently. If they've got a potty, maybe we need to make sure that we've got your potty and your bag packed before you go. So really involving them in all the different steps of what it looks like. To go to nursery, and then how that looks like in the family dynamic. So mum's got her bag ready for her day at work and dad's got his bag. We've packed our lunches together, what's going to go in our lunchbox. So it's really just involving them in the process, and then in their mind they know what's going to happen, who they're going to see there, and what they're going to do when they're there.
Okay. And so what should parents expect on that first day when they drop their little one?
Really good question, because everyone's different. Every child is different.
And every daycare or nursery centre will be approaching this slightly differently as well.
Definitely. So first thing they'll be sharing with you will be hopefully your routine, a timetable of where your children are going to be in the day, and that's really positive. And I always suggest that parents take that and pop that back on the fridge, and they can reference that when they're talking about their day. I know you went out to the play area today. What did you play with there? Who did you play with? So it's a really good conversation starter in the car on the way home, or when you're around the dinner table overnight. Another thing that they'll be talking about is you'll get to meet the staff. So you get to meet the classroom teacher, the director of the centre if you haven't met them before. They'll be able to see their classroom, the other areas that they're involved in, meet some of the other children. And the parents as well, to meet some of the other parents that they might be seeing on a daily drop-off and a pickup. So they're the sort of things that I think, and simple little things that, are reflecting back now are important, like where their bag's going to go, that they look for their little name on their. Do
they take their shoes off at the beginning of the day, or what is the daily routine? On arrival.
Yes, and then prior to that, you'd hope you'd have a list of items that you need to be taking. When you go.
And what's the best way? Because I think the biggest thing on that first day is actually separating for that first time, isn't it? So what's the best way for parents to handle that separation on the first day and any separation anxiety?
And so we did previously a podcast with Tanya Johnson, and we'll share that in the show notes, and that's specifically about separation anxiety. But in a nutshell, it's all about, like you said, the vibes that parents are giving to their child. So they need to, try to be as brief as they can in their goodbyes. And a lot of parents will want to stay and look through the window, and that's really not helpful, to be honest.
Yeah, it drags it out, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah. And I used to think for parents, the children would explain to me that they can see mum and dad, but mum and dad aren't in the classroom with them.
Yeah.
Why is that? So it's about really supporting that new, that new experience. So again, if you're standing and watching them, then what message is that saying about the staff that you're leaving them with? So it's about trust, and it's about, you're going to be with Mrs. whoever today, she's your classroom teacher, and you know she's going to take really good care of you, and you know that your child's going to be safe, and you communicate that with your child. I think that's a really, really important thing.
And as nursery directors ourselves, we know, don't we, that we've seen it time and time again where, you know, parents draw it out.
They really do.
They take too long leaving their children. And what they don't actually understand, I think, is that they're actually prolonging the inevitable.
Yes.
They're actually extending the painful period for their children. And, I mean, in most cases, you know, again, every child is different, as we always say. But in most cases, as soon as their parent is out of sight, they'll settle within a couple of minutes, and we can just shift their focus onto an activity or onto a friend. And it's just about keeping them actively involved and busy. And, you know, it always seems that once the parent's out of the picture, out of sight, out of mind seems
Absolutely.
to happen.
I was just about to say that, out of sight, out of mind. And I think a really good educator will, you know, invite mum and, you know, the child into the classroom, and then there'll be lots of different activities for them to choose from things that will take their interest, get them involved in an activity, but never just sneak out. Say, you know, mummy or daddy's going to leave you now, and then I'm going to come back. And then as things start to transition, you'll leave them at the door. Maybe you might leave them in the reception in the morning, and they'll go in by themselves. But whatever they do, what works for them is best for them. And I think take it on a case-by-case basis. But I really think as for parents, it's very, very important to, you know, really just be very supportive of the staff, that, you know, mummy trusts you or daddy trusts that teacher to look after you and keep you safe, and I'm going to be back and pick you up at the end of the day when I finish my work. And those continual messages that are consistent is really, really important for little ones. They love that routine.
And what are some common reactions that you've seen children having in their first week of nursery, and how can parents be, you know, helping to deal with that at home? It's hard. It is hard for them. But I think, like I said, if your educators are keeping them very busy, you're keeping to a routine where they're going to have their lunch, and like I said, they're going to unpack their special lunch box that they've packed themselves. I think the most important thing is keeping consistent. So you drop them off at the same time every day, you pick them up at the same time every day, and then the child knows what to expect, and that should really limit their reactions to that change. So I think, you know, a really consistent routine. And I think if you are having doubts or you're upset, or like you said, sitting in the car howling, then you do that not in front of the child. I think that's really important. That has to just be a private moment.
No, it does have to be, but I have seen it being not a private moment, and the child's looking to you.
Because then it upsets the child.
It upsets them. They don't want to see mummy and daddy upset. So I think that's really, really important. But there can be also things, there can be tears. I think the hardest thing is actually when a child is independent and they walk in and say bye, and off they go, and you're like,
what?
You know, like,
feeling very
where's
unloved.
the love, you know? And there is love, but they're just excited to go and meet their friends. And like I said, some have had older siblings, and they might have
so they're used to the concept of going to school.
So they know that, you know, I'm a big girl now, or I'm a big boy now because I'm following my brother and sister.
Yeah.
They might have taken their brother and sister to school. We see that quite a lot. Mum and dad will drop off the older sibling, and the younger one is the one that's not at nursery or has the paddy, because they want to stay, and there's all this great stuff to do, and everyone's, you know, like, you know, good morning, we're going to have such a great time, and they're like, so that's sometimes, but they are prepared for what it looks like, and you know, it's really organic conversation.
I found with my two that the biggest thing was that they were just so tired, you know, especially in that first week, because they're not used to being so switched on and so engaged for consistently for multiple hours like that. So I found that was a big thing, that I had to nap them, like they would just, or when it got to after bath time, they'd have their dinner, and then they would just like crash.
Conk out. Yeah, absolutely, because it is, I think as well, we do need to be mindful that it is a change in their routine, and it can be very overstimulating depending on your home environment. It can be, if you don't have siblings at home, or it's just mum and dad at home, or just mum or just dad, or whatever it is a change. And I think being mindful of that is really, really important, that, their routine might change a little bit. They might need an extra nap. They might come home ravenous, whatever it is, then it's, slowly ensure that you're adapting that to your routine and don't make any big sweeping changes. And I think a lot of it is as well, be mindful of what is happening in the home. Sometimes a new siblings has come, or there might be visitors, or whatever's happening, still try to stick as best you can to your normal routine. And then at school, at nursery, they will stick to their routine as well. And then, it makes things a lot easier to transition.
And that kind of brings me on to what role do the educators play in settling the child? Like, I guess for them, this is what they do every day, so they're used to dealing with this situation constantly.
Yeah, and I think, again, with the trust with parents, do your research before you choose a nursery. That, and we've got a podcast on that as well, actually, about choosing a nursery for your child. But I think that's really important to, be aware that these are trained professionals. They do deal with this very regularly, day in, day out, at the start of the, academic year and throughout the year as new children join, and really ensure that you've got your trust with them. They should be preparing you for a timetable of what the day looks like, any special equipment that you can bring in for any special events that they have, and communicating with you your child's progress with you on a regular basis. And there's all different ways of doing that. You can have an app that you're sharing real-time information. You might have a report card at the end. Some nurseries do, some nurseries don't. It's very different how you communicate. Informal communication, and I think, formal communication as well. Yeah. And then, there's time that you can meet with the staff if you want to be. So your staff will be approachable.
And it's really important to, I think, every mum goes in with the intention of having a good positive relationship with the educators that their children are dealing with. And how is it best to create that positive relationship with educators?
I think really just be open communication is really important. If something is bothering you, I would always say, address that then and there in the school day. I think as a parent myself, and even though I'm an educator, if I go home and I think about something, I might really make it bigger than it is. And sometimes there's a really simple and easy, reason for what's happened. And so I think that open those lines of communication very, very early on with your educator. And, they'll get to know your child as well. And it's really nice for you to share some things that might be happening in your family home that might explain why if the child's had a change of behaviour or something. So I think that's a really, really important thing. And then together you can celebrate all the really, real highs that you've got going on with that child as well. So, yeah.
Nice. And so what are some of the signs that a child is thriving in their nursery environment, or if they're struggling in their nursery environment?
I think thriving is definitely, they're building their sense of independence, and they're happy to go into nursery every day. They're talking about their experiences positively. You can see that they're making progress. Maybe that's something like their pencil grip, or, with your littlest ones, maybe something to do with them using a spoon by themselves, being independent. And if they're not doing so well, sometimes that can be a regression. That can be maybe a regression in their toilet training, not wanting to go to nursery, mostly tears. That's how it can sort of manifest itself, for sure.
And some children take a little bit longer to settle, don't they? So we can't immediately take those signs as, my child shouldn't be at this centre.
Yes.
I think
you've got to give it time.
You've got to give it a little bit of time. Yeah.
There's always a reason. I always find there's always a reason. So sometimes it'll be, we're sticking to our routine. If something happened at home, let's just have those open lines of communication to work out what's going on here. And sometimes that can be, something as simple as, with children, they can make things a lot bigger than they are. Maybe you've packed them something that they didn't want to eat in their lunchbox, or they've seen someone else has got a pair of shoes on that they want to wear, or especially when they're tired, they might not want to get out of bed in the morning, and they might want a bit of extra time in bed. And so that comes out as, I don't want to go to school today. Yeah. So we've got to be very mindful that, children just sort of say it how it is. And I don't want to go to school today might just mean, I just want to stay home and sleep a bit longer and then maybe, watch the TV by myself. So I think sticking to that routine, whether they say that or not, they get there, they have a great time, they have a great experience. So really, really stick to that routine is really, really important.
And what advice would you have for parents that have children that might not be napping or eating or engaging as well at nursery?
I think what's really, really important is to, have a look at, like I said, on a case-by-case basis with the child. Is it something that they're not interested, something that they eat at home that they don't want to eat at nursery? They might see something another child's eating and they might want to have that. So I think there's always a reason to have a look, a bit of a deeper dive into what's actually happening. Napping, again, that can be as a part of a developmental milestone. That may mean they're dropping that nap now.
Or overstimulated.
Overstimulated because they just don't want to stop, they don't want to play.
Yeah.
So maybe that means they go to bed earlier. So I think talking with your educators about, and talking to the child as well, but you will see what they're doing. They might not want to nap because they're very engaged in their play. So the educator will say to mum and dad at the end of the day, they didn't have a nap today because they were really, really busy playing, and then maybe their nap time comes, their bedtime shifts a little bit. There is definitely a shift between the school and home, and that will be a change, and that will have to change again when they start for grade 1 in a education, primary and elementary school. Things, they're changing and adapting so much at this age. So I think you just keep on communicating.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. And so with, we're talking about parents, engaging well with their educators and, kind of being involved in day-to-day. But how can parents balance letting go, letting their little one go off to nursery, with staying involved and staying engaged in their child's nursery experience? I think it's a real balance, isn't it?
So as well, good nurseries will always be communicating with parents. Like I said, we talked about the app. There's a bit of an update, some photos of things on a daily basis. And then you'll get a newsletter about things that are coming up. And then sometimes you can plan, you might be able to go into work a little bit late or leave work, or they have special events that are on. So I think if you can try to get to as many of them. Also as well, they might record those sessions for parents to be able to see at a later date if they can't get away from work. So it's all about being accessible, and a newsletter can share, things that, parents might miss if they're not doing the pick up and drop off. I never did the pick up and drop off. I was a teacher, so I never got to do that. So I found that newsletter was a real opportunity for me to connect with what's going on in the school, and there's educators will use their email as well, or whatever communication tool that the nursery is going to be using. So I think there's a lot of ways to be involved if you can be.
Yeah, and I think that at the end of the day, it's all about as a parent, you've gone through a process of choosing a nursery.
Mm-hmm.
So the nursery that you have chosen, you've chosen it for a whole host of reasons. You've looked at the educators, that you've looked at the facility, you've looked at the management, you've looked at the curriculum. And so this was a choice that you were comfortable with, placing your child in this situation. And I think you have to trust
absolutely
that you've made that right choice. And on that first day especially, that's when, the trust is kind of tested
to the
most.
Yes.
And, I think it's just about creating those positive relationships with your educators, listening to your child, talking to them about it in a positive manner in the lead up. And if you've done all that groundwork, I think that your child's definitely going to have the best chance of a fabulous first day.
Definitely. And I've seen so many parents, as they've left, I've had to say, this is way worse on you than it is on them.
Absolutely.
And then they'll say, oh, can you just pop in and just make sure that they're settled or they're not crying, and you pop in and they're not. And so parents can go, because we all want to go to work and know that our little one is
safe and happy.
Is safe and happy, and not in tears. So, and I know some children that will spend the whole nursery year, every day they'll come in, they'll cry, and it's literally for mum's benefit. And as soon as she's walked out the door and gone, they stop. And it's just, like I said, everyone's different and everyone's having a different experience. So your good educators, they'll tap into that. For sure.
And finally, Mel, so are there any resources or anything that you can suggest that parents can refer to to help them out ahead of that first day?
So the nursery should always be providing you with a list, and I know that we're going to pop a example list into the show notes, but really educate yourself as well. I think have a list of equipment that you can go and involve your child as much as you can in choosing the items that they need to take to nursery for their first day that are special and new and haven't been used before. And then, there's lots of things that you can read about as well. You can read books about their first day at nursery. You can talk about it. There's a lot of resources online. You can listen to the Growing Little Humans podcast to educate yourself. And I think, there's lots of forums there to ask questions and just know that everyone's got to go through this and everyone's experience is going to be different.
Yeah. And just talking to all your friends
your
and other
girlfriends,
mums.
yes, mum friends.
Because you're bound to have some that have gone through this already.
They will, and they'll tell you some horror stories. It's like childbirth. A lot of people want to tell you that my child had a horrible experience. But I think really be a clean slate about it. And like I said, if it's worrying you, your child's going to pick up on that. So
But I think there's a whole lot of more positive first day experiences out than there are negative.
Absolutely, lots of positive experiences. Yeah. So you can definitely tap into them for sure. So.
Well, thank you, Mel, for talking to us about this today, and hopefully we've helped people have a bit more of a positive first day experience.
Yeah, great. And I really enjoy my first time being interviewed, so now we know what the guests all go through. But no, thank you so much. It's been great to talk about this, and please, if you have questions, I would love to be able to answer them.
Please reach out to us and let us know if you have any other topics that you would like us to talk about.
And here come the legals. Our podcast is purely brought to you for educational and entertainment purposes. We are just two hectic mums and we are certainly not licensed therapists.
This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of licensed or qualified professionals. And if you do need some help, please seek out some professional advice.